Alrighty, folks, we are going to talk about something we have never done before. That is hard for me to say with 18,000 videos on YouTube. And that is, what is the tech stack real estate investors need to think about? And to have this conversation, we're going to be speaking with the CEO of Baselane, Matthias. How you doing, Matthias?
I'm doing very well, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on your show today. Very excited to talk about this topic. I think, behind every great rental property owner, there's definitely a set of tools that make this possible. Obviously, there's a team and most importantly, a community that helps get yourself on this journey. But really drives efficiency, effectiveness, sometimes accuracy of data is super important. You all have had a CPA ask you for your receipts or I need my financials, and you don't have them at hand, and it takes a lot of time to get that ready. And ultimately, I think most investors I speak to, they want to grow their business. And to do so, you need a system, right? There needs to be some automation in there. And so we've identified a huge problem in there, obviously across the financial service side, which we'll touch into a little bit, and how you kind of really optimize the financial operating system. But there's 4 core areas that I think I'd love to touch upon, that I think are great tools to help you win in this space.
I love it. I mean, again, it's really hard for me to think of a topic we haven't broached on this channel with 18,000 videos over 8 years. So this is the first time we're hitting something. So that's really cool for me. Let's not forget that my channel has an audience of, people in the beginning, but also lots of operators who have 5, 10, sometimes even 15 or 20 years in the business. So when we're talking about the tech stack, let's make sure we address kind of both the audience. So Matthias, this is your house. Where do you want to start with this tech stack?
Yeah, so I think what I'll say is that one of the biggest problems that Baselane kind of identified when we got started was that across the financial management, there were sometimes investors that were using 6 different tools just to manage the financial service side of things, and that's forgetting acquiring the property, forget about the property management stuff, maintenance and all that. This is just the financial service side of things.
Right. Just the money, just money.
Exactly.
Just money.
They were using multiple bank accounts, not built for real estate, maybe a few checking accounts, a few savings accounts.
Sure.
They had, different credit cards, sometimes for each property. You can just imagine kind of a bulging wallet with multiple cards in there. Many times, contractors, they're paying them through Venmo, through Cash App. Sometimes that's hard to track. You forgot to kind of put an expense, and you're not putting that into your taxes. And then tracking the expenses, managing the books. Like everyone comes, we're kind of in tax time at the moment, right? So folks are probably organizing your expenses and trying to track all your income. It was mind-boggling that so many people were doing this in a manual way. And beyond the time that's going into it, there's a lot of inaccuracies. Inaccuracies usually mean missed deductions.
Sure.
And when you don't have something very well organized, of course, then there sometimes isn't the right level of intelligence in the tool, right? It's not telling you, hey, I can improve my expenses, I can increase my rent. So that's that bookkeeping pain. And of course, we all know how much bookkeepers cost. And so, I think bookkeepers, they're essential, but let's use their time on, things that are very high value, right? And advisory things. And I'll share a few that I think are fantastic, in a bit. And then, of course, everyone needs to collect rent, and, collecting rent, that is the livelihood of us and investors. And, we want that to be paid on time. We don't want to be chasing people down. And we want, we want a notification. Hey, someone's deposited money. Hey, I've already gone and reminded that person so that they know to pay on time. So that was just the financial side of things, and we'll dive into kind of how Baselane solves that. But maybe I want to zoom out a bit, and what I want to do is actually maybe start with kind of the 4 main categories I think that are the essential stack to help real estate investors, whether you're doing you're just starting out or you're looking to kind of figure things out as you kind of set yourself up for success in 2026. Whether you're doing long-term rentals, you're doing mid-term rentals, you have some short-term rentals. I think all of these things apply. First thing is deal acquisition, right? You need to buy your first property or buy your 10th property, and there's so much data out there to help find the right property and assess the right comps, calculators, and so forth. And I think there's 2 companies that I want to name, which I think done a fantastic job of this, both on offline and on market deals. One is PropStream.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have 160 million properties on their platform, both, as I mentioned, on and off market. You can imagine doing comps, calculators, demographic data. Another one is Batch Leads, and what I love about that product is they have a really powerful property search. Right? I think they have like over 100 filters, and then once you've kind of dialed down kind of what you're looking for, you can easily engage with the property owners. So I think that's fantastic. And then one other tool that I'll mention on the deal side, which I think is awesome, and is not always used for the acquisition side, is kind of on the short-term rental side. Products like AirDNA and Price Labs, mostly kind of what you call revenue management, right? Dynamic pricing, but they have so much data on kind of supply and demand in your market. And so, they're fantastic tools if you know how to use them well to say, hey, where are the pockets of opportunity for me to kind of, think about, is short-term the right strategy for my rental? And so those are, I won't go into too many details, but those are fantastic tools.
Yeah.
On the
yeah.
side.
When I think about buying or identifying deals, I really think about two investors, one at the very beginning and then one that's kind of seasoned. So the beginning investor, a lot of them come to me, or they find one rental at a time. And they're like, hey, it doesn't work in my backyard. Right. I don't know where to go. And that's why I think, things like PropStream or Rentometer or any of these other kind of data sets, they're like metal detectors, right? They're like, hey, let's take out this metal detector and just see what we see. And again, like any metal detector, sometimes they find, gold, and sometimes they find a bottle cap. You just don't know you got to go deeper. And then I think about, the folks that follow what we talk about here at One Rental at a Time: get a buy box, be focused, look every day, be disciplined, figure out average. And what I love about those systems, and actually I use PropStream for this, is I had a very tight buy box, and deals were hard to find. This was years ago. So I just did a mailer to like an entire condo community. And, it was the only one I ever did. I got 2 leads and closed on 1 deal. But, once you have a buy box, you can really dig in. And today, how am I using PropStream? So I'm trying to do a new buy box, and I'm just trying to figure out, okay, you got on market. I'm looking for 50% equity or more, because what I'm doing is I'm like, hey, I could pay cash, but it's going to be cheap, or I can get seller financing in second position. So again, once you figure out what you want to do, then you can start playing with these systems and create value. And that's where elite investors go. So I love number 1. What's number 2?
Yeah, no, fantastic tools. And I think, what I've seen is a few of them are starting to incorporate AI, which for me just translates into kind of less time, right? It can do some of those searches for you, right? It can do some of the outreach for you, the follow-up.
Notify you. Yeah, it's absolutely.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff. The second category really is kind of starting to set up now your operations. And I think there's 2 parts of it. One is the financial operations, and the other one I would consider the property management system. So I'll talk about both of those. Financial operating system, that's what Baseline does. We are 5-year-old business. We got started really with the vision that, there's 14 million individual real estate investors in the United States, and they're all using general purpose financial tools, really not built for real estate investors.
Amen. Having started 30 years ago? Yes, that is very true.
And, vast majority of our customers are coming off a Bank of America account, or a TD Bank, or a Regions Bank, or a community bank. And, we know what banks are. Banks, service a general population, and they do as best as they can with, thousands of different types of businesses or different types of individuals. But, real estate investors have a lot of commonality. And, our customers that we focus on today are, anyone that, is what we consider someone that is, just getting started, or has scaled to, 30 plus properties, owners across long-term, mid-term, short-term rental strategies. And we've gone across kind of the financial stack and say, how can we really make this highly efficient and automated for our customers? How can we drive a lot of education through our product? So as you're coming, how do we help you actually set up your finances for success? And at the same time, try to drive intelligence, right? You, as an investor, we're making decisions all the time. How do we make the best decisions on what, how my property is performing and how I can improve things, or hey, is something not performing? Is this a property that I should dispose of, or how can I improve it, right? And so there's a lot of things to discuss. And so the first thing is, like, we really create bank accounts, both checking and savings accounts, that are built across every property. So if you have property A, you open a bank account for property A. You can open a security deposit account. You can open a maintenance reserve if you want to hold like a profit account, right? So we structure what we call property level accounts. And so the reason why this is so important is when an expense hits for property A, it's going to come out of property A's bank account.
Yep.
And you keep things really organized. And our AI will then go and actually tag that transaction to the specific tax category, right? So all of a sudden, you've started to create, structure, and you may have, let's say 4 properties. You have 4 operating accounts for each of these. You may have one account for just security deposits to keep them clean, and then you may have a profit account, right? Every quarter, I want to take some profit off the table. I want to keep it there in a savings account. I want to make sure that I'm actually, we're making money. Saving for potential new acquisition, or for something you want to do on your personal life, and so this is super important. And we also have a whole card product on our platform. You can set up cards for a specific property or for an expense type. You can even have all sorts of kind of controls. So if you wanted to give a specific card to someone that helps you with maintenance, you can say, I just want this to be $500 a month. I want to only tag it already to maintenance, so the system already knows where that transaction is going. Of course, we don't have any hidden fees, no monthly fees, no minimum balance requirements. We really want to make it very transparent for our customers. At the same time, if you have receipts, I've heard nightmare stories where CPAs are asking for receipts at the end of year, and people have boxes or all sorts of different methods to kind of organize the receipts. With Baselane, you can actually drop in 100 receipts into our platform. We will go find the transactions and automatically attach them to the different transactions. If you have invoices in your email, just forward them to specific based on the email that we provide our customers, recognizes where it's coming from, scans our AI scans the invoice, attaches it right to the right transaction. So this level of organization is critical, because the second you want to say, okay, I want to go and look at my cash flow or a P&L for a property, you press a button, it takes seconds, and you can see that, right? So I can, we have this beautiful graph where you can go side by side. Imagine you have 3 properties. You want to look at P&L for year to date, or you want to look at the last year. You just do the presets of filters. You can actually see P&L. How have they compared? Why has one performed better than the other? Let's actually let's go look at cash flow. Let's actually look at the balance sheet of each of these. And even more scary sometimes. So I need my tax docs, right? Yeah. And we have a specialized tax center. As all of this, as you can imagine, is highly automated. Everything's coming in with the click of a button. You say, I want a tax package for these properties for this time period, for fiscal year 2025, and it'll pull all the receipts that we've automatically matched. It will have income statements, Schedule E, everything all wrapped up, and you can send that directly, to your tax preparer or CPA, right? And so, saving you tons of time, but just giving you a lot of clarity, right? I think clarity is something that we all want. With our finances, and sometimes it's difficult because there could be hundreds, or if you've scaled to many properties, thousands of transactions that are occurring throughout the year. And so I think this is really our vision. How can we drive a lot of financial clarity to our customers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, because again, most real estate investors, in my opinion, once they get past a couple, they just have just a portfolio, right? They're not really doing a great job of managing it down to the unit. And then it's really interesting with the pickup in short-term and mid-term rentals. There's a lot more real estate investors than I would have probably guessed that have some long-term, some short-term, and some mid-term. And again, the ability to kind of manage all of that is very different. In a long-term rental, right, you'll have, ideally you'll have 12 deposits, right? You'll have one a month, and maybe you have like 3 expenses, right? If it's a single family home. But if you go to a short-term rental, where your average stay is 3 days, I mean, you could have 5, 6, 7 deposits a month, and there's every time there's a cleaning fee and deposits and just all of this other stuff. So having a platform that's not going to, be purpose built for long term and then jerry rigged for short term, or vice versa, it's pretty sexy.
When we got started, we very much were kind of focused on the long term rental, and all of a sudden, I think Airbnb and Booking is some of the largest contributors of deposits coming to the bank, and we can see that. And I think 40% of our customers have multiple strategies.
Yeah, but right? So that doesn't surprise me. That's
so almost 50% of the real estate community is really actually going after multiple strategies. And I think there's a lot of platforms that enable this and to do it in a really easy way. But I think we've really built our product to focus on this. The last thing I'll say about our product, I think rent collection is critical for every real estate investor. We have an automated rent collection product. It's you get fast deposits in 2 days directly into your bank account, directly built into Baselane, so everything is in one place. Lots of notifications and automation around it. So that's the financial OS and kind of that piece.
Okay, and then you obviously have the day-to-day management layer, which are other providers.
Correct. Yeah. So then there's what I call the property management system, right? And this is your marketing, your listings, right? You're going to go list on apartments.com or realtor.com or Zillow. You want to you have the application, you have the screening. You want to make sure you're bringing in high quality tenants. You need to draft a compliant and secure lease document. And then there's the communication side, maintenance tickets, all of that stuff.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. The management of running the unit.
So on the long-term rental side, I'll name two names. I think Hemlane is one of them, and we know those guys well. We love the product they're building. Yep. And then there's Turbo Tenant, and both have things that are great about them. Turbo Tenant is very self-serve. A lot of products that are easy to use. Hemlane as well. And I think those are great place for you to have your core property management system built up. I think if you are a short-term rental, though, that they're slightly different, right? So on the short-term rental side, you want to be able to connect, your OTAs. I mean, it depends, right? Imagine you have one or two short-term rentals, you may just go directly to Airbnb or Booking.com. But once you have, and even if you have two or three, you might as well consider some of the lightweight options. There's like a Guesty Light, it's $9 a month, I think, right? And this connects all of your OTAs, right? You don't have double bookings. You can connect on Airbnb, on Booking. You can do your own direct listings and your own kind of advertising site through them. You communicate with them, and they manage operations, right? There's a lot more.
Who was that last one? $9? Who was that?
Sorry. So the ones I'll mention, so there's Hospitable, there's Postaway, and I think Guesty. Guesty obviously caters to sometimes the larger, sometimes operators, Superhost, or even the vacation rental managers. But they do have a $9 kind of Guesty Light version that I think is fantastic for someone that has a few doors.
Okay. Very cool. All right. And so that's 2 of the 4. Where do we go from there?
Yeah. So that's 3 of the 4. So it's the property management, the finances, the deal acquisition. And then, the last thing is what I would consider professional services. And this kind of encompasses a broader bucket of things, right? So, we really believe in actually structuring and forming the right LLC to protect your asset, right? You're investing a lot of money in properties. We work a lot with, Anderson Business Advisors. We work with Prime Corporate Services, two fantastic providers that, can really structure the entity which protects your asset best. And we work with them, helping them open bank accounts for their customers. So I think that's super important. There's obviously tons of other LLC formation companies. I would look at ones that really specialize in real estate. Real estate has its nuance. Then on the insurance side, today we partner with Obi. Obi is a fantastic insurance provider for property liability insurance for real estate investors. I also mentioned Steadily, another great provider. They focus on everything from single family, multifamily, apartment buildings, condos. And I think the old way of getting insurance was having to call a bunch of real estate brokers. A lot of it was time consuming. They'd be asking you for information piecemeal through email. Today it's extremely fast. 30 seconds, you're getting a quote, live quote. You do this all online. Very, very good competitive pricing.
Yeah, Steadily saved my butt. We had a commercial broker I'd used for 20 years, dropped the ball, and Steadily insured 9 of my residential properties in 24 hours, and that also saved me 20 grand. So, shout out Steadily for coming through for me.
No, these are companies that actually kind of got started. Same time we got started. Around
for sure.
2019, 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. I remember. But yeah, they're specialized in real estate. They know what they're doing.
Yep.
So I would definitely check them out. And then the other kind of professional service side I would talk about is something that has has come up more recently is really around cost segregation in tax strategies. And so, I think, on the tax strategy side, I'll kind of mention two folks that are, more than CPAs. One is Vestora. If you're a Baselane customer, they specialize on kind of tax strategy and advisory using the Baselane platform. So they're professionals that, you can give them access through kind of our multi-user access to their advisors, and they really help you structure things if you want a little bit additional support and actually help you on kind of your tax strategy. And they do offer kind of just real estate investment advisory strategies as well. And on the CPA side, CPA Iola, and that's CPA AIOLA, they specialize in real estate tax strategy. They work with thousands of real estate investors, and they really know what they're doing. And then the other thing I mentioned was cost segregation. So being able to depreciate different parts of your assets at different depreciation schedules can save you a lot of money. And it's almost like a hidden thing that seems some investors still are not fully aware of. We've launched a really beautiful kind of live balance sheet with a cost segregation component built into it. So you can actually go and put your assets into Baselane. You can upload a cost segregation study and actually depreciate different parts of your properties at different rates. And so there's a lot of benefits there from the tax side. We do work with a platform called EST, Engineering Tax Services. I think one of the more professional kind of and larger kind of cost segregation companies in the US, and obviously I highly recommend those folks. So that's on the professional service side. Obviously, there's tons of things, but kind of recapping, there's the acquisition side of things, being very data driven. I think I like your idea of having a very strict buy box, and you'll get there. The financial operating system, essential, right? This is something that if you do wrong, it's gonna be a headache.
Yeah, you die. You die if you don't figure out cash flow and how to pay your bills. You lose the property. That's not good. Yeah.
Property management system, obviously this is a superpower to market, be compliant with leases, find tenants that are they have great income verification, great background check stuff, so that you're actually bringing in high quality tenants. Like that can make or break a year for you if you bring in the wrong tenant. And then obviously I mentioned kind of the professional service. And the last thing I'll mention, so there is a fifth category, and I think that is the community and mentors that everyone uses. And I think this is where investors come to learn, to avoid mistakes, to accelerate their growth. And obviously, I know one rental at times school community is a fantastic place for that. Bigger pockets. I'm sure most investors know. Community of millions of real estate investors across every state, different strategies. They have fantastic forums, and they actually now have a fantastic Bigger Pockets Pro membership that gets you a lot of amazing value. So they've kind of built up some really cool partners, including Baselane and other partners across lending, insurance, and stuff. So check them out and kind of their offering there.
Very cool, Matthias. This is a lot of fun. This is our first time we had a conversation. We're going to do this again every couple of weeks. I appreciate you. If somebody wanted to learn more about Baselane, where do we send them?
Send them to baselane.com. So that is BASELANE.com. And we have a specific actually promotion with you. So if customers go to kind of baselane.com, then we have a specific coupon that gets them $100 off when they sign up and fund an account. So they'll get a promotion.
Very cool. There'll be a link in the description, folks. I believe I have that in the email. I will put that there. Matthias, thank you for your time. This is a lot of fun. I love this conversation. I look forward to having you again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate it.